I guess we should just do formal stuff of approving minutes. They look fine to me. I don't know how it works because we're not gonna have a second.
I can second.
Sure, first and second.
All right. I mean, do we want to approve them without Mark?
It doesn't really matter to me. I mean, he didn't give any comments, right? We sent him out.
No,
Right.
and personally, it's just kind of hard for me to keep track of the ones that I'm posting and not posting. So if I could get these posted, that's helpful for me.
You can always correct them, I guess. If we need to.
Yeah.
All right. I second it.
And then all in favor?
Aye.
And oh yeah, I guess we should do a roll call. Lee, are you
Smith
here?
is present.
And Elizabeth Akers-Moore is present. Great, okay. So we've done the minutes. Is Chris here? I can't.
Yeah,
see, but-
I'm here.
Hi, Chris.
Hello.
You got any updates for us?
No, so I just wanted to provide a little bit more of a detailed update on discussions with the Office of Economic Development. So I think the first point is that, Elizabeth, you had asked for Lee to participate in the review of the contract review and offer his suggestions on that. And just to be clear, we haven't received a contract yet. So these discussions with the Office of Economic Development were really just, you know, they wanted to meet with us to kind of really go over, you know, a few things. One was to convey that there is a lot of political interest in this earmark from state legislators and other state agencies. And they were a little bit surprised about that. So if you look at the earmark, there's about $28 million that were approved in the fiscal year 25 state budget. So there's about 60 earmarks that were approved. I think they all cap out at $1 million. And I think there's 2 or 3 $1 million earmarks, and then Concord is listed fourth with the 725,000. So this is high on their radar, and they wanted to let us know. And then the second, and there
What does that mean? Sorry, what is high on their radar? That people are trying to fight it, or that?
And the surprise piece.
Yeah.
Oh, the surprise was that there was knowledge about this earmark by other legislators, and they had asked about
Like
it.
positive?
They didn't get into it.
Okay.
Sound like it's positive, probably.
And then I think the other thing that, I'm sorry, what was the other question? What was it, Elizabeth?
No, I didn't understand what that meant, political interest.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you don't know either if that's positive or negative, although I doubt interest is positive, but.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, but they can't really do anything about it because it's already been approved.
No, that's fine. Right. It wasn't, they weren't conveying it as positive or negative. They were just noting it. The second thing that they were conveying was that they were fine to, so Megan had talked about during her discussion, she talked about possibly using staff time to fill out some of the funding requirements. But really, just to take a step back, the Office of Economic Development was really, what they were saying was that they would allow the town to go back in time to gather any expenses, right? The MCI Advisory Board, any town expenses used for MCI redevelopment going back to July 29th. So that wasn't clear with our earlier discussions. And that was kind of part of the tension, was that they were late issuing these earmarks. Simon had said they do this every year in October. Well, they were late this year, and I think they're kind of changing their process. But so the original assumption was that we would be able to capture expenses on the date of contract execution, which was going to be in November at some point. But they wanted to let us know that they're willing to carve back expenses incurred from July 29th, 2024 for these purposes. So that was just good to hear. So
it is good to hear, unless it's I still don't have a good sense, and I don't think anyone does, frankly, of like, okay, they're willing to go backwards. Are they willing to go forwards and say that? I know there's a question about the escrow. There's a question about what it means for the funds to be committed. No one's really gotten that answer yet, have they?
They have been unequivocal. We cannot use these funds for services starting July 1, 2025 and beyond.
So if you, for example, gave basically put stuff, gave someone a retainer, a master planner, before for services, they couldn't do any work past July 21st or whatever you said.
Yeah, I mean, so it doesn't have to do with like the contract date or the billing date. It has to do with when the services were rendered. When were the services actually performed? And those services have to occur in this fiscal year. So I think Elizabeth, you would ask, Lee to look at the contract language. Maybe there's a little bit of flexibility. Is a retainer concept possible? And we'll have to take a look at that when we actually see the contract. But right now, the Office of Economic Development is telling us very clear, clear signs, these services have to happen. Whether, and the service isn't a retainer, right? The service isn't contracting. It's actually, do we have staff or consultants doing work? And what is that work? I'll throw
Yeah, Lee, I mean, I think it'd be useful for you to look at it when it comes in. I don't mean there's nothing you're going to be able to really do, but I'm just worried that we're putting all the staff time that's already been paid for, and then we're eating into money that we could maybe use to pay for a planner. But then I also have heard that the planner cost is going to be closer to 250,000 than to 400 something. So, yeah, I guess Lee, you don't mind taking a look at it when they get it.
I don't mind. I'm
Yeah.
not optimistic that I'm gonna change their mind, but
I don't think you're gonna be able to change your mind. Maybe you can just, clarify the definition of what the word is.
you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but do you think this is some type of scheme or plot to limit the town's ability to actually be productive in our work on this project?
I mean, I think another way of answering that is that I think the state has deliberately set the $1 million limit for earmarks because of
We're below.
Yeah, $1 million or below because of the risks involved in trying to do the work in a compressed timeline. And
But
really
that doesn't affect us. We didn't get $1 million.
No, but the concept of limiting funds based on time does.
Meaning they're treating everybody that way.
Right. And in all likelihood, I would guess that every year there's millions of dollars of unspent earmarks that are returned back to state coffers, and that's part of the process. So they don't see it. I would imagine that the state sees that as a normal part of the earmark process.
Okay.
If you hear any more about the quote unquote political interest, that's an interesting concept. I mean, maybe people, because originally this was only supposed to be 400 something thousand, right? And it ended up being 700 something. Maybe that's the political interest. God, I don't know. But okay, we'll just wait to get that then. Anything else, Chris?
Yeah, so I think that I think Megan's concern is really year 2. So fiscal year 26, and we know we have funds to spend this year. We will have 0 funds starting July 1, 2025. And, I think there's a kind of a decision to be made by this subcommittee and maybe the advisory board itself on either requesting a PAC treatment of the current earmark or making a specific earmark request. Megan had cautioned that the PAC treatment may result in a lapse in funding for several months while that PAC legislative bill gets considered, and we may see no gap in funding if it's included with an earmark for fiscal year 26. But I think there's a real, there's a funding cliff that starts July 1, that,
What,
you know,
Like 1 or 21.
that starts July 1, 2025. Yeah.
why do you not fear that we're gonna be in the exact same situation next year if we're seeking a, new appropriation / earmark that also doesn't come until, the fall or winter?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a risk concerns on that when these earmarks are issued and approved. We would be in a different spot in the future because we'll have a budget and we'll have demonstrated expenses, and the budget will be harder and easier to justify for an earmark request.
I like that approach. This is just my opinion, but in the context of issuing the RFP, it may be worth considering limiting the scope of that to something that can actually be accomplished by June 30, rather than, expressing expectations, or however you want to put it, to possible respondents that, hey, this is 2 or 3 years worth of work for us, but in reality, it's 2 or 3 months worth of work for them. You know what I mean? Like, just be reasonable or realistic about what they can get done by June 30. And then maybe it just says, like, an acknowledgement of that limitation, and if reappropriated by whatever means, this is what we'd like to do for the next fiscal year.
I don't have the RFP in front of me, but the timeline, does it do that, Chris?
So in the budget for the RFP, there is a statement in there that acknowledges that the town will be seeking additional state funds to complete the work. The timeline of the RFP, in terms of the tasks, also estimates that, yes, this work is going to go past July 1.
Yes, but as I'm looking at it, it does lead to your point. The tasks are broken up where they end. Task 4 ends June 2025, I assume, with
Okay.
your thought, and then beginning August, September 2025 for the next one. Yeah.
All right. I just, whether
It
it's
says
through
visiting planning report complete Monday, June 30th, 2025. So again, I think Shannon, what Shannon's saying is right, but it also has a concrete thing that needs to be done by the end of June.
Yeah, I guess I just, I don't know if there'll be like a Q&A session or something, but I just think we should be really clear about that.
There is, right, Shannon?
Yeah, there's one scheduled.
Okay.
So to the point about our role in this, because as legal and government affairs, I think we should be involved in talking about the budget, but I wonder if the right thing to do is wait until we get the paperwork for this earmark and then talk to Simon about what might be helpful in terms of us getting involved with how to proceed forward. Does that make sense to you, Chris?
It does. Yeah.
But I do think there's a role for us as soon as, that comes up. So maybe one day you'll get that contract and we can move on, but I don't know.
They want to see the budget from the advisory board. So I think the advisory board's talking about that or presenting that to the select board on December 16th.
Shannon, did we get that? I don't see that draft budget. Am I just missing it?
No, it's because we don't have the draft yet.
Oh my God, it's not just me. Okay, good.
Yeah.
I saw it on the agenda and I was like, I don't remember seeing that.
Yeah, I think Dan just mentioned it briefly that there's going to be a presentation to the select board on the 16th, but that the draft budget has not been developed yet.
Well, that should probably be done. Okay.
Yeah. Luckily the advisory board meets the day of the select board meeting. So there will be an opportunity for the board to review it. before the presentation happens to the select board.
Like a very limited.
Yeah, it's definitely limited. It's definitely limited, but at least,
I'm trying to think if there's any advantage for me asking Dan to send it to us, if we even have any claim to see it before then, but.
Well, Elizabeth, the benefit would be that the sooner we can get that, we can submit it for the earmark request because it's required to get the contract issued or to see the draft contract.
So, do you think, and Lee, this is a question for you too, I should write to Dan and kind of exert the fact that we are the government liaisons, and therefore we're trying to get this going, the contracts going, and we want to see the budget beforehand?
And I think maybe most importantly, if I understood what Chris just said, that there's no contract until we send a budget.
Right. So that being the case, we could say, and as the government affairs group, we think
So is the select board do they need to approve our budget?
the way I've heard it discussed with, Mary Hartman is that I think they'd like to endorse it. But that ultimately budget decisions are up to the town manager, I thought. But they would like to endorse and support the budget that is presented.
Okay, I'm gonna write to Dan and say that we consider our role as being working on this now and going forward and getting these contracts in, and therefore we would love to see a draft of it as soon as possible, and so we can weigh in. Lee, does that sound fair?
Yep.
Great. And he'll either tell me no or he'll send it to me. And then
I mean, it's kind of, I guess I'm a little surprised in your sense that we're not entitled to it. Like, why wouldn't the full board get it?
I think the full board is entitled to it. I think we should have already seen it. But now I'm trying to like push it, since he hasn't given it to us, I'm trying to be like, okay, well, as our subcommittee.
Yeah.
I absolutely don't think that it's appropriate to just give it to us the day that he's presenting it. But I'd like to argue that we have a little more stake in it, since we're gonna be having conversations going forward about further earmarks.
Yeah, I
I
also
feel
wasn't suggesting that you weren't gonna get it until that day. Ideally, with meeting materials, they're ready earlier. But I was just saying the full advisory board would be able, in an open meeting, to discuss it.
Yeah, no,
Ideally, you will have it before Monday for sure. But that just the advisory board will legally be able to talk about it.
okay, I'll just send it out to Dan just so he knows that we're thinking about it for this and for going forward then. Because I do then think, like I said, that we should be talking to Simon's office about how to line us up best for next year. Anything else, Chris?
So I think that's my update on EOED. I think for DOT, I had sent out just draft copies for the subcommittee to consider.
Yeah, and I apologize, my changes didn't make it into this packet, so I just resent them. I don't know, Lee, if you wanna, I think we need to get on this, so.
I'm sorry, are you referring to the letter?
The letter, yeah, both the letters. I made changes on both of them, but they only just got to you, so you won't have had a chance to look at them.
Yeah, I read them. I just had one substantive change, which was it references 37 acres and it should be 51.
That's right. Good catch. Yep.
Fourth paragraph.
I didn't really change anything substantively. I did a little wordsmithing, but I heard from Kyle right before this meeting and he has been reaching out to someone.
Sorry, who's
Kyle is is Simon's aide.
Oh, okay.
And he said, I said, we're working on this letter, even though he had already worked, he was working with someone named Daniel don't know how you pronounce that, Rasticott. Have you dealt with him, Chris?
Rasico, I think, is the DOT engineer.
Highway liaison, yeah. So he's working with him to set up a meeting for us, but I said I'm gonna circulate this. I said I would send him, once we finalize it, this letter anyway, and then he will also send it to that Daniel, and then he asked, who is this letter gonna be sent to? Mass DOT secretary, highway administrator, or others? I thought we were kind of going back and forth because he was gonna get us a contact, but I think at this point, do we just send it to, what do you think, Chris, Mass DOT secretary and the highway administrator?
Likely the highway. That's a great question. Likely the highway administrator. I don't lead you.
I mean, I said last meeting that I thought it should go to the secretary. You know, if that person doesn't want to deal with it, they'll send it to the right person anyway. But you know, I'd like to have the you know, highest level of attention given to it. That's just my view.
I don't think there's any downside to that, and we're already getting at the highway people through this other angle, it looks like. I also met with Paul yesterday from DCAM. And he was in Concord, so he wanted to talk, and he also said that he would help out on their end, working with Mass DOT. So could we incorporate these comments, Chris, and then finalize this with the secretary as the addressee?
I have two other suggested changes.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
No.
Just in, I guess, kind of the second to last paragraph on the first one, schedule a meeting. I might suggest inserting like someone specific, like, you know, whether it's, I mean, the project manager for the Rotary, or I don't know what the right title is, but just make it clear that we're meeting with someone with some authority at MassDOT. I don't know who that is. And then I would just also suggest CCing maybe Paul at DCAM and probably the town manager.
Definitely, I'm gonna CC Paul. Hold on, we'll CC DCAM as well.
Paul is DCAM.
Sorry, I'm writing to Kyle Stapleton, tell him that. So yeah. So Paul, and then the subcommittee would like to schedule a meeting with the project manager for the
or senior staff or something like that. Senior staff and or the project manager for the Rotary, Concord Rotary.
Senior staff or project manager. Yeah, how about that, Chris? Maybe flip it, project manager or senior staff.
And or
anyone who would meet with us. Do you want to circulate it one more time, Chris? And we could just make comments, but not, and then I say we give us a deadline of like a couple days, and if no one gets comments back to you, let's finalize it and send it out.
Do you want to CC the town manager?
I don't really care. Sorry, that's a bad attitude. Of course I do. I don't know. Sure. I don't see a harm, I guess.
I think as a courtesy.
Okay, sure. As a courtesy. I'm trying to think of what's going to get us the best chances of actually getting a meeting.
Well, I don't think CCing the town manager has anything to do with it. But
yeah, sorry, that's what I was being dismissive of it because I'm like, I don't know. But sure, as a courtesy, let's do that. I guess as a courtesy, we should CC. Well, we'll just send it to Dan too, obviously.
Maybe Megan is the better choice just since she's the project person on this. I don't know. What does Shannon and Chris think?
I think the more parties you add to a CC, the better. So, I mean, you may even, so I think adding Megan would be great. Maybe even Ellen Cathcart.
Oh yeah, that's fine. Okay. Anything else on that letter?
So I think there were 2 letters, right? So one was to DOT and one was to stakeholders.
Yep. I also sent you some changes to the stakeholder letter.
To be
Nothing,
perfectly frank, I don't understand why we're sending that. I'm not objecting to it, but I don't get it.
yeah. It is kind of interesting, because at this point, I guess you could argue that we just reach out directly to the people we actually want to talk to, like we are with MassDOT. As opposed,
Why wouldn't they, like, they're getting the letter from communications or the full board or whatever it is. Like, why wouldn't they reach out to them, and then if it's in our bailiwick, whoever gets it can just send it our way? But like I said, I'm not objecting, I'm just wondering.
I see your point. I mean, one way you could say, well, now they know exactly who to reach out to, but I also would argue, why
But
don't
do they?
I would have no idea. They've gotten like 10 things from us, you mean? And they
Right.
don't know what the heck to do. Yeah, I would argue that we just go like we're doing with MassDOT, and as we identify people we actually want to talk with right away, we write directly to them. Is that?
This is supposed to go to every stakeholder?
Every stakeholder on that list, the community outreach subcommittee matrix.
It's fine. I'm just, I'll
No,
just
I don't.
express my
I think you're
skepticism.
right.
I mean, we've come this far, but you know.
I know we've come this far, but so then to your point, we're gonna send this, and then we're gonna follow up again with another letter like we do for MassDOT. Why don't we just follow up with a MassDOT type letter for each person we want to talk to? Chris, Shannon, thoughts?
I mean, you both seem really ambivalent about the stakeholder letter, so maybe just put a pause on that and just
Put a
move
pause
forward.
on that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's written, so you know, when we find someone who should really get it, it's ready to go.
Got it. It's mass mailing out to everyone.
And not to mention the expense. Speaking of which, if we've got significant postage expenses, add that to the list.
Yeah, why
I
aren't
mean,
we getting
there's
meetings
406 stakeholders, you know?
catered? Really? We should
Every
be
nickel
investing in
counts.
tech for our meetings, all that kind of stuff, right? Yeah, let's put a pin on that one. And then I also had when I talked to Paul, talked about the Mass Historical Commission as being someone, which I didn't see on the matrix from the outreach committee, although maybe I missed it. But as someone that maybe we reach directly out to get on their radar. Chris, you're giving me a look like you're not interested in that.
No, I'm happy to help. Yeah.
I mean, I don't think we have
Like, take this letter that we just dismissed and send it to Brona Simon, the commissioner of the Historic Commission.
or that is the commissioner. Yeah. Just handwrite, just cross out contact at Mass DOT and put that.
Oh, there you go.
I don't know when we have to do that, but that was one that I talked.
Well,
him about.
they're definitely going to be involved at a minimum for the what do they call it, the warden's building or whatever, and the fountain and all that. So we might as well put it on the radar.
Yeah, and Paul had said, so they already hired, DCAM had already hired a conservation consultant, a preservation person to kind of do a report. I think the advantage is if there's money anywhere through grants to save some of these buildings. I am not convinced, because no one has convinced me that there are a lot of legal protections, even if you're they're registered on the state registry.
Well, not yet.
I'm not even sure what is available to us, but I think if we talk to Mass Historical Commission and they're interested, then the political interest would be more important than the preservation report. Do you know what I mean? I think, yes, I'd say let's reach out to Mass Historical Commission.
I think it would be beneficial to, if it's not on their radar already, to put it on there, and then secondarily to let them know that we are very much aware of the historic interest and value in at least some of the structures on the campus.
Okay, so does it make sense to take the letter that we just discarded and adapt it to say a couple of things about history?
Maybe.
Because I don't think that they've gotten any letter. Am I wrong, Chris and Shannon? Like, I don't think they got a letter from John's group either.
They could have got some from DCAM, but.
Well, from DCAM, yes, but I don't think that our advisory board has reached out to them, because I didn't see them.
Unless there was someone from historic included in the legislation that was approved, I would say they did not.
Great. Okay, so Chris, just because you wanted more work, you want to put a paragraph in here about historic?
Absolutely, but just, yes, happy to do that. Shannon, are you, I thought Ann Clifford had done some work on this, on identifying historic structures. And maybe she had been like in touch with the Mass Historical Commission.
I don't know if she's been in touch with them, but I know that she's aware of what the historic structures are. But I don't know if she spoke with them. I don't know what the liaising relationship between our historical commission is and the state. But they're definitely aware of which are the historic structures.
Maybe invite Ann to either our next meeting or the full board's next meeting.
I would say, personally, I would rather reach out to these guys first. We could
The
use
state?
Ann.
The
I
state?
don't think, yeah. Yeah, we already had Ann at our meeting, and I don't think a lot came from it. I think it's just gonna get lost in the discussion in general. I personally am more interested in putting it on the Mass Historical, getting a contact there and having conversations, which she can come to. I don't think having her back before the board will be that helpful.
I don't know the answer to this, but it could be that it's more appropriate for her to be the lead or the liaison between the town and the state.
I would argue that we're the government liaison and that it would be useful to reach out directly and find out what we can find out.
Okay.
Does it help you that I have a master's in historic preservation?
Yes.
There you
Is
go.
that true?
It is.
Okay, awesome.
From England, so it's a different regulatory
Oh,
structure.
everything there is old.
Yeah. They actually have power in England to regulate stuff. That's why I'm always like, the US. England, they like won't let you do anything inside or outside of a historic building. So I'm fine copying her on it, but I don't think it'll hurt for us.
We have to copy Ann on it. I mean, she'll be offended if we don't.
Okay, great. Well, let's adapt that. And yeah, thanks, Chris, for doing all these letters. And the other one that Paul mentioned was the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, which I know is already on this list. So I don't know if that's one that we want to reach out to now or wait. He brought it up.
My 2 cents is it's premature.
Okay, great. I'm fine holding off on that. It was a good conversation with Paul. I mean, he's like, we're ready to step in if you lose your funding. I don't know what that means. Like, so, you know, he's like, I think.
Well, if that means they're ready to fund our continuing consultant work, I don't know if that.
Yes, I don't know if that was a promise or if that was just like, we're here. And if I mean, I don't know. I think he was yeah.
I might continue that specific conversation. Like, is that a possibility? And can you be ready to go?
Yeah. Yeah.
July 1.
And I think that's why getting this budget stuff and just kind of getting ourselves in the mix of it will be helpful. And then we can have those conversations with Simon too, who I'm sure is already thinking about it. And other than that, it was a good conversation. And I don't know, I feel, and I don't know if you do, Chris, that DCAM maybe they were always this way and I was just very skeptical, but have now been more like, we're really happy that you guys are taking on some of this and we want to work with you. And I know they always said that, but I believe them more now and I'm not sure why, but. I
gotta think they are thrilled with the level of work that we are doing.
Now, I would, you think they are?
I'm optimistic that they are.
I think so. I think it was a slow start, but I think that
we're all figuring out our path and all that. But I mean, just the fact that we're putting out this RFP for this significant consultant that's going to really inform them what to do with their land subject to our zoning. That's huge.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's going to be so fun when we get to town. I was like, he's from Minnesota. I was like, you ever been to a New England town meeting? And he's like, no. I was like, yeah.
Oh. Tell him to go to the one wherever he lives, unless he's in a city.
Yeah, I know. I was like, oh, you're going to love it. Don't worry about it. Zoning will pass, no problem. I'm sitting on a property right now that took 7 years to get permitted for the market. So, I was like, it'll be no problem. Don't worry. Okay, other than that, do we have anything else?
Public comment?
Public comment. Is there anyone in the public who'd like to comment? I can't see if there's anyone even here. Shannon, is there?
Hearing none?
No.
Motion to adjourn?
Great. Motion to adjourn. All right,
So moved.
great.